Do you know what time she leaves tomorrow, Jeremy?
What's that?
What time is her birth actually leave? Danny said she's flying straight back.
Or not. I think she's stopping somewhere. Oh, I think she's stopping here again, but for like 15 minutes.
Okay, so no.
I think it's a little.
You know, they don't have a lot of time.
No, but 5 doesn't allow a lot of.
Yeah, they don't pack it, said Parker said they were going to church and then going to the church, so. I would say she would do be surprised.
Yeah, I know. So,
I want to buy a book for AJ.
oh, yeah, it does.
I want to buy a book for AJ.
Oh, sure.
He doesn't have the book.
Oh,
Give it to me. Did you know, they had a party for Jen's birthday, so AJ and Allison said, she was wearing this gorgeous sweater. And I'm going, that's good on you, where'd you get it? He said, Jeremy gave it to me, he said, everything I want to wear is cashmere. Yeah, I'm sure they tried. It was in Sweden,
Sure.
which we know. And then to the boys. Have you been out east?
Oh, next week.
Next week? When you go to 4 or 5 days?
I'm going for a full night's time.
Are you
So I'm flying to DC, getting her dad, driving him up to Massachusetts.
Okay.
Yeah, and then.
Because that's where Nancy is, right?
That's what she is, but there's assisted living, it's like a memory care ward.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to get.
But, Amanda's not enough.
No, she's in a house, and although she's rapid, it's like, you know, her kind of fight or flight escape from the recovery place in DC. She didn't think of anything. So, yeah, she essentially abandoned her. And yeah, she did.
That's not
I
surprising.
mean, she, of course, when she got up there and found herself.
So they're going to get her from some weekend to.
Yeah, I can make it in one day. Because I gotta get there by closing, because otherwise, he could, and we could range the house, but it would be so, disorientation would be so, disorientation.
Good luck with that. It's always tough.
And now, obviously, it's just, the idea is to get him set up.
Oh, yeah. Do you think he'll be, will he be really confused?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's gotta be so hard to see.
Jeremy, this is Bryce Hamilton, another member of the committee.
That's it. Pleasure to be with you. Thanks for coming.
And this is Jeremy's mother-in-law and his wife Annie. Jeremy, I'm going to make just a couple of announcements and introduce you.
I love that. I have driven further for fewer people, so I'm okay.
Well, I do hope this won't be all of us.
What time is
It's not even 10, so.
What time is this 9 o'clock start?
Well, theoretically, 10 minutes of 10, but it never does. Nobody's coming out yet, so this is a sign. We got a couple minutes? Felix, is that right? Okay. Good morning, and welcome to Plymouth Sunday Forum. Whether in person with us or online, we're very glad you're here. Just two brief bits of housekeeping. If you ask a question, please use the microphone. We can pass that around so that the people online can hear the question. And then there are hearing devices on the table here. If you would like to use those, please do. We're fortunate to have with us today Jeremy Norton, the author of Trauma Sponges, Dispatches from the Scarred Heart of Emergency Response. Jeremy made his way to Minnesota after a childhood in DC, a bachelor's degree in literature from Tufts, a master's in writing at Boston University, and teaching high school English in Tennessee. He taught creative writing at the Loft Center here before he found his calling with the Minneapolis Fire Department, where he's been for the last 24 years. He has been part of, and since 2007 has captained, crews serving in North Minneapolis and in South Minneapolis in the neighborhood of the George Floyd Square. Trauma Sponges reveals a deep understanding of the city, as well as the emergency response workers and the residents they're committed to help. Jeremy, thank you for being here and sharing your insights with us.
All right. Thank you all very much. Hello out there in Cyberland. We've got many distinguished guests in the house with us, but not least of which is my mother-in-law, who is my most ardent cheerleader. But I also think she's here today just to see if I would spontaneously combust crossing the threshold of a church. It did not happen. So I wrote a book, and when I was trying to sell the book, a lot of people asked, a lot of publishers, book people said, a fireman's book. Well, I don't really I don't know that there's a market for that. Or if they were willing to look at it, they said, I'm really disappointed. I feel that you tricked me. And I said, I go, what? It's like, there are no stories about firemen and bravado and like basically backdraft, but written. And I said, if you read the first paragraph, it said, this is not that book. And people do wonder why somebody who's a firefighter is writing about essentially the sociology of emergency response, which is also the sociology of our culture. And I did not grow up wanting to be a firefighter. I gave very little thought to it. I moved out here in 1994, and a woman who had gone to high school behind me was out here, and she had just joined the department. And that was my first glimmer, is this woman who was 23, had just bought a house, and had a great schedule, but also had health care and dental insurance. And I was waiting tables, and I had none of those. And as I hung out and became interested in the job, and I thought it would be a way for me to write on the side, I would listen to her talk, and what she was talking about wasn't just exciting emergency response, but it was mostly talking about how she and all the other women who were kind of second wave of the women hired in Minneapolis, every shift, what they had to deal with was kind of an unrelenting misogyny, racism, and homophobia by their own coworkers. And they couldn't learn to do the job free of, unfettered by, all the ingrained intransigence of the people who were supposed to be their brotherhood, right? And so then eventually they would get to, we delivered a baby, there was a shooting, there was a fire. But it was always, and it reminded me of growing up at my dinner tables. Both my parents are lawyers, and my dad would come home and just not talk about much. And my mom would talk about being a lawyer, but it was always fighting in the 70s and 80s against all the enduring sexism of her coworkers, right? So it was never just learning how to be a lawyer, it was you had to deal with all the men who said you shouldn't be here, or all the men who were gropey and handsy and sexist and misogynist. So imagine the fury of that generation of second-wave feminists about 10 years ago when Donald Trump, the greasiest of old-school gropers, resurged, and all the work they had done for all the years, they thought they were past that. What's past is prologue. But I was at rookie school 20 years ago this year. Excuse me, 25 years ago this year. And, hey, come on in. No need to run. And we're getting trained how to be firefighters. We're getting trained how to be EMTs. And one of the senior captains, who looked kind of like Ed Asner, for those of you who grew up watching TV, and he was irreverent. He was kind of salty. I think he was a Jehovah's Witness as well, or a Seventh-day Adventist. But you know, for all the people who talked about this is a paramilitary organization, and you have to, you know, be really pressed and look impressive in your uniform because that's how, you know, that's the measure of the man or woman. He was wearing faded pants, a t-shirt with a hole in it, and his shoes were untied and sloppy. But he knew what he was talking about. And so that was one thing that was interesting to see, the difference between a surface presentation and then a core content. But he was assigned a unit on infection control. And come on in.
There will be many more people coming in the moments the service with.
When the light hits us and the spirit is strong, I get it. All right.
For whatever that's worth and where you are preparing.
All right. All right, what I need now is somebody here to feign a heart attack. We will stall for a couple minutes. All right. For those of you out there in Cyberland, we're going to wait a minute or two.
Good talk. Since I got here late, would you remind me your introduction while you wait?
I'll wait till everyone else comes in. I'll wait till everyone else comes in, and then I'll restart.
That's a good idea. Of course, duh.
It'll be a performance art, and you'll just keep doing the introduction.
There you go. And not just for me.
Yeah, it's over.
I've been watching a lot of comedian Instagram videos, so I'm working on my crowd work. Where is everybody from? Minneapolis, huh? War-torn city. I heard you can't go anywhere in there anymore safely. Oh, wait, that's only on Alpha News. Hey, I was just out there. I went to the South Dakota Festival of Book. Of book. Word. Book. Yeah, it's a collective. It's a literary festival, but it was in Brookings this year, which they took pains to say was the most liberal town in South Dakota.
Which one?
Brookings?
Oh, yeah, because that's where the state university is.
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice. I had a good time. I had a good time. From where?
From Atlanta,
Uh-huh.
and since Nick was here, so I ran across the road in the store the day before yesterday, in Hollywood.
Uh-huh.
And then read it, I got it at the library, read it last night on my Kindle. Can't wait to hear you speak. My son is in EMS.
Okay.
So many of the things that you addressed, he's only 23. He
Okay.
talks about a lot, and he's a Macaulay graduate.
No way. So he's 23, so definitely after my time. That's great.
Macaulay, it's a school he taught there.
Okay, we talk about
Just say test.
Test.
And I wish he could be here himself when he was in Denver. We've been texting on it.
Awesome. I believe the audio or they replay this, so you can go to the church's website. So. This is the good stuff. I've been fortunate in the past year. My book came out a year ago, and I've been able to travel around the state and around the country and speak to different groups. And while it's all really cool and exciting, it really keeps you in check to drive 3 hours to a library and have the librarian and 2 other people show up. It's intimate. It's good. It's intimate. I like that. Sounds good. I don't want to have to fight with the angelic choir, but I guess we will. Well, I think the gentleman's coming. I think the gentleman's going to come back. I'll ask him to do it when he comes back. That's okay. It does not, very little bothers me. I think what's going to be funny is when I forget this is on rollers and I just do Benny Hill and go right on over. That's all right. I'll just. Don't worry. I fall a lot. So, when did he graduate from Macaulay?
Well, he's 23. He's been out of college, a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Go back in 2019.
Okay.
Not great.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, it's everything, you say about school is absolutely true. And similar to you, Paco, who found great mentorship there and learned how to find their mentors. And it speaks to all the same sociological issues that you're bringing up in the book. Anyhow, it was so interesting.
That's awesome. That's so super cool. All right, welcome. And for those of you who hit pause in the internet land, thank you. Come on in. For those of y'all who missed the very beginning, I did give out most of the secrets of life. Pays to be there early. So I do have a job where for 24, almost 25 years, I show up at work and I have no idea what is ahead of us, the nature of emergency response. We don't get a planned list of the catastrophes that will happen in our area. And because of that, we're expected to be flexible, respond with aplomb to other people's chaoses. And a lot of us do it well as kind of, bad news Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. Like some salty people who have a lot of skills. But some people need rigidity, and they need the sense of utter control, because that's how they stave off the fear and the panic about the unknown. And so you can see how much crisis it causes if for every day of your work, you're worried and trying to control everything in a job where you control almost nothing. So I don't mind the ebb and flow of people, because really, it's a good day to be here. All right. We're going to start again. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Jeremy Norton. I'm a Minneapolis firefighter, EMT. I have been working for Minneapolis since the year 2000, so I'm almost at 25 years. Yesterday was my elder daughter's 25th birthday. She was 4 months old when we started rookie school, so I've been able to mark my career through her growth. I have 2 lovely daughters and 1 or 2 not so lovely daughters. No, okay. No, I'm sorry. I have 2 kids, and they're wonderful and glorious. For those of you who came in late, I started explaining the context of the book I wrote, Trauma Sponges, which is over there. It started as me trying to explain to the public what it is that happens when you call 911. So it is, what do emergency responders do? But it also was trying to explain to people what is happening in our lives, in our homes, in the alleys and streets and apartments. Hey, good morning, come on in. Front row's good, I'm not throwing anything today. And because people don't understand, like most of us, until we have a crisis, we don't expect to have a crisis. Most people don't give much thought to a fire. They don't give much thought to a gas leak until the fire trucks have blocked your street off and you're inconvenienced and pissed off. Right? We don't give thought to it or until a tragedy befalls us, and then suddenly the world is jagged and uncertain. And I wanted to look at the factors where a predominantly straight white male workforce respond in Minneapolis, but in many cities. Come on in, it's a great discussion. I know the guy who's doing it. That when people who look like me are primarily responding to the crises of people who don't have health, housing, wealth, options, access, resources. Right? In most cities in America, that means straight white men, often suburban men, are responding to people of color in crisis. That is a significant portion of our everyday work. That is on top of or in addition to someone having chest pain, someone falling down, a tree branch falling on your foot, a car wreck, all that other stuff, right? So I wanted to explain, not just to you all as readers, but also to my coworkers, because many of us don't think very much beyond what we're doing right now, what's right in front of us. And it was that lack of thinking, lack of connection making, that really motivated the book as I was editing it in 2020, right? Because I've been working on the book since the year 2000. About 2019, I had a decent draft, and I was looking at the things I just mentioned. And then 2020 happened with COVID, with the killing of George Floyd, with the uprising, with the semi-non-existent aftermath, right? And so the things that I've been trying to talk about, my poor family having to endure me talking about it constantly, but at work, trying to get other people to understand what I've been writing about, now suddenly, essentially white America had this very undeniable example of the systemic forces that crush down on people, right? And as I say publicly, I say in the book, I've said in interviews, responding to the killing of George Floyd was not my first death by police in Minneapolis. So the event that shocked many people into a very, very belated awareness of systemic racism and individual bad actions was essentially just another day until the video came out, or the videos came out, and until there was an uprising, right? The killing of Jamar Clark could and should have done the same thing, Northside Minneapolis in 215, but it didn't. And the lack of any revolutionary uprising allowed the status quo to keep on. But I'm going to come back to that. How the hell did some kid from DC who fell into firefighting start doing this? I say often that I am not the main character of the book. I'm not the most interesting person in the book. I'm much more like Ishmael. I survived, and I'm telling you about it. I have a Moby Dick fetish. I was in rookie school, and this old salty captain was explaining to us the infection control thing. And at the time, they were talking about firefighting, because that's what we do. We have big red trucks, we have helmets, cool gear. Some of us have cool mustaches. I do not, because I can't grow one. Right, but it's the iconic. We don't have dogs anymore because we overfed them. But Dalmatians, whatever. And so while we were learning all of the firefighting stuff, and that is all amped with adrenaline and kind of machismo and chest thumping, can you do it? Can you pull her out? Can you pull him out? Can you lift? Can you put this fire out? And none of us had ever been firefighters, so we didn't know. So in our heads, this uncertainty is growing. And then they were like, hey, by the way, you're going to have to do some EMS work, but ew, we don't like it. And it's just throw oxygen on them, walk them down to the ambulance. It was like the lowballing of it was stunning from the very get-go. And this old salty captain sat there one day kind of kicking his unpolished, worn-out shoes on the edge of the desk. And I said before, he looked a lot like Ed Asner, and he's scratching his cheek. And he's like, fellas, you're going to see a lot of crap in this job. You're going to see a lot of suffering. You're going to see a lot of mess. But remember, your job is to go home to your wives. You're going to see people who, for some reason or another, are suffering. You didn't put them there. God had put them there. So it's not your job to save them. It's not or what he said was, it's not your job to fall down in the dirt with them. Whatever happened to them, they brought on themselves. That was his infection control thing. Not put on gloves and a mask, and we're all sitting there stunned because my class of 36 had 6 women, about 16%, which at that time was like a metric crap ton of women. But we've been talking about using firefighters instead of firemen, like breaking a lot of the old default habits. Not wives, because not everyone had a wife at home, et cetera, et cetera. So this old school guy was basically just saying, you're going to see people, but they put themselves where they are, and that's them. And we were all like, holy crap, this is not what we expected. So let's pause with that. I want you to think about the system. In Minneapolis, if you have to call 911, there really are only 3 options that are going to come. Well, maybe the power company. But you're going to call and say, something's happening inside this building. The police might come, firefighters might come, ambulance might come, or all 3 of us will come. Those are your options for the safety net, or catching what falls through the safety net. That's it. That is your emergency response system. What we are trained for, police, fire, and paramedics, is over here. Thank you so much. is over here. As I said before, when we're at rookie school and they're yelling at us about throwing ladders and pulling hose and fighting fire, it's over here. Are you going to be able to do it? Before my first shift, I had this dream that I was going to meet my captain. The first fire we went to, a wall was going to fall on him, and I would have to figure some intrepid way to pull him out. The reality was the first fire I went to with him was a smoky dryer in the basement. I got lost, turned around, and thought I was going to die, and probably found 4 different religions while I was crawling in a circle, right? I would never have, what I thought it was going to be and what it was were 2 totally different things. But here's the thing. While we're over here worrying, am I going to do it? And I've got a good sense of humor about myself and have a decent sense of who I am. But a lot of us really worry, and so in their worrying, they are trying to fake it, right? They're trying to posture, because you get done with rookie school, and they give you a helmet, they give you a fire truck and a crew, and you are expected to be able to save lives. And a lot of my coworkers carry that weight, and they lean into it. And so particularly, straight white suburban men in a culture of white suburban men being tough and macho, there's no room, they didn't allow the room to say, I don't know, to say, I need help, to say, I'm afraid. And what you do instead is you white knuckle it, and you get tough and you're gruff, and the old Vietnam era chiefs have by now retired, right? And at that time, they managed by yelling. All solutions were managed by yelling and fear, right? And I grew up in the 70s. I had football coaches who kicked me in the butt or yelled at me, so I'm pretty impervious to that. But when you're yelling without cause, I don't respect you. Right? And one of the things we've recognized now as a country is we did not do a good job welcoming back any of the Vietnam veterans. We did not do right by them in any form. So imagine them coming back 18, 19, 20 years old, battle-scarred, which is what they say, oh, you'll be perfect for the fire department. You're not going to worry. You've seen stuff. But it also means their coping was horrible, and they went into these hermetic, siloed fire stations where they just white-knuckled it, drank, smoked, fought, and panicked and screamed at each other. That is not a very effective way of doing anything. But that was what we knew. And so while they were telling us that fighting fire was going to define us, it was going to be what we did, over here, 80% of our calls were responding to 911 medical emergency calls. Right? So I'm looking this way, the fire. Am I going to be able to do it? And meanwhile, I'm going over here and I'm going to people with chest pain. We go to church a lot. Sunday mornings, people fall out left and right. So I've done CPR in the pews. I've mostly, I'm going to be honest, sweet little old ladies who did not eat breakfast. And not even the Catholics going up and down and going to hydrostatic shock, but they just get lightheaded and faint. But then, of course, you've got 20 to 200 people trying to listen, trying to get their God on, while Edna's down in the aisles. These are the juxtapositions of my job. I would love sometimes to ask them, and I've actually said at times, could we stop the preacher from praying loudly over our fallen Edna, because I can't hear what she's saying and I can't hear her pulse. Right? Those are the juxtapositions, and it looks bad if we start dragging her out through the pews when she's going to be fine. We go to those sort of things, and we go to heart attacks, we go to strokes, we go to head injuries, we go to despair, depression. What we see over here fills our days. Right? I am privileged and tasked in a career of every day I go to work, we encounter people's worst or last moments. That is our workplace, right? I knew, because I'm a nerd and because my friend Jen, when I was looking into it, would talk about it, would talk about what they were doing. I at least was prepared that EMS work was going to be a large part of our work. But then I came into this culture where they talked about the firefighting and that the EMS work was nurse work, as if nurses aren't basically doctors but not as well paid, right? Like that insulting, again, chauvinistic dismissal, right? I have saved more lives over here. I have witnessed hundreds of deaths over here. I've witnessed probably thousands of suffering and dyings over here. I've pulled a couple people out of fires. I've seen a fair number, a handful of, fire victims. Fire is horrible, scary, damaging, all that. But that proportion, 80%, we do not focus on. Guess how big the Trojan horse of trauma is for most responders, right? I don't know what happened. It's like the hell, because you're not looking at it. And again, when you have kind of straight white suburban men who refuse to go to therapy, to refuse to look inward, refuse to acknowledge that things bother them, they make lives hard on themselves, they make life hard on their families, they make life hard on each other. And then when they crack, it used to be they would just drink themselves into a coma, smoke themselves into a coma, or fight. But now it's also despair and suicide, right? It doesn't have to be that way. And then that's for firefighters. And when we mess up, when we come in over-adrenalized and we finally do have a fire, and we go rushing into a fire because, gosh, it's fine, we're excited, and oh my God, am I going to do it, and what are we going to do, and everyone, ah! And unlike the TV shows, we just watched, we were watching a TV show last night, and the hero ran in, the whole house on the outside was on fire. He ran up the stairs, ran through, there was fire all around him, and he found his daughter and dragged her out. And I was like, okay, the reality of it is, it's skin melting heat right there, like flesh would melt at the door, and you can't see anything, right? So Hollywood can't ever do fire, right? Because it would just be like, close your eyes and put pillows on your head and run around in circles and then get hot. Like it doesn't look good. But while we're worrying and panicking, we make bad tactical decisions, right? Across the country, most firefighters who have died in buildings they did not need to be in, meaning they ignored what we are given in terms of a practical size up, what are the life safety issues, and what are the fire conditions. Most of the time, we come out safely. But when we don't, it's predictable. Everyone gets sad, and we put on our fancy uniforms, and we have the bagpipes and and they say he died doing or she died doing what he loved. Most of the time, it's a he, right? That's us. But if we go back to paramedics and police officers, the other two legs of your social net, below the social net. Paramedics want to do advanced pre-hospital care. They want to save lives. They want to intubate. They want to restart your heart. That's what they're thinking about. Am I going to be able to do this? And there's a huge turnover rate because they're getting beaten down. And so there are many of them, even though they're way more trained than I am, I've got decades more experience than most of them. So they're over here worrying about this stuff. The reality of their job is they are transporting people because you have a question and your clinic is closed, and 911 can't problem solve for you, so they tell you so then they send an ambulance. Right? And I'm going to get to that part of this systemic in a couple minutes. But so most paramedics spend their careers telling the dumb firefighters to lift the heavy fallen person so they protect their backs, but responding to things that are not actually medically challenged emergencies. They are transport. They are answering questions. But because the for-profit hospitals demand that they bring people in for money, for insurance money, and to avoid being sued, every call, they're not using any of their training. They're just like, let's go. She's got blue hair. She's got to go in. Green on green. You got to go in. Like, they're not looking, right? Police officers want to help. They joined to fight crime or whatever they're joining for. And they go to training, and their inculcation is more severe because they're trained if you turn your back, if you let your guard down, the baddie, is going to shoot you. They're raised into that, and they're taught, their culture reinforces that you can't ever let anyone get above you. Can't ever, let your guard down. That everyone out there is out to get you. Everyone out there might be a threat. The reality of it is they need their pen and their sense of humor more than anything else. Like on a car wreck, you need a squad car to come because your insurance company wants that documentation. That's not public safety. That's just being a tool for the insurance companies. That's capitalism, right? On a psych hold, in our system, the police have to write a psych hold on somebody, so they have to come for that, their pen. The police officers, more than even fire and medics, are trained over here with an unfortunate warrior mindset, but they're responding over here to all the aspects of our society that are mostly just social issues. And where firefighters, if they go in blindly, put ourselves in danger. We risk overextending into a building, the building falls on us, we die. With police officers, when they go in with this, every single person could be a threat. The civilians die, right? And if you look at the number of unarmed people of color who've been killed by police in this town, in this state, and in this nation, the fact that we accepted this as cost of doing business, and there was always some, that's too bad. You know, the default is often, and the more conservative default is, well, they were a criminal or they should have done what they were told, right? I've had to watch the footage, the officer's footage of the killing of George Floyd several dozen times. It's horrendous. I can say with ironclad certainty, George Floyd never fought, he never resisted, he never tried to flee. That man said from the very get-go he was panicked, he couldn't breathe, and he needed help, right? He was high, but that is irrelevant. The young officers who engaged Mr. Floyd were doing a pretty good job until Derek Chauvin, who was the senior officer, came up. And then they had to prove that they were tough enough. And J. Alexander King was the one who then started trying to force the issue. George Floyd said he was claustrophobic. As they tried to shove him in the car, he flailed, panicked. In about 30 seconds, he went out the other side, fell on the ground, and they knelt on him for that 9+ minutes fatally, right? It was a man begging to breathe, and only one of the officers, Thomas Lane, recognized from their training that something was wrong. But because in their culture, you were told to respect the senior officer, he was failed by both their culture, their system, and then his own fear of being ostracized. So he never actually challenged enough to get Chauvin's attention. J. Alexander King had the other, much more of a typical male response of trying to get tough. And that's what I see on the firegrounds a lot. People trying to look tough, so they go running in and doing dumb stuff quickly. But again, when we do dumb stuff, we put ourselves at risk. When the officers do, they kill a man, set off what has happened. But my more important point is in the system. At no point in any of the other deaths that were preventable in Minneapolis did the Minneapolis Police Department leadership say, what can we do differently? This is not acceptable. And at no point did anyone in the city of Minneapolis government say this is not acceptable. The millions that the city has paid off on wrongful deaths and an abuse of power is scandalous. And it goes because too many politicians are afraid of the backlash from the Back the Blue crowd, from the police officers union. But my point is, and very little actually changed in Minneapolis after the death of George Floyd, because it's systemic, right? It is systemic. Nowhere did they say, and I testified in the trials, both federal and state, and it was brutal. It was a big deal that former Chief Arredondo testified against Chauvin, because it was like breaking the thin blue line. But it was a very tactical testimony. because they cut a line. Chauvin was on an iceberg out to sea, and he protected the department, right? And he said Chauvin failed to follow their policies. And their policies are, if someone goes unresponsive, you get 3 bodies off of him, and you roll him over. My point is that, and cases across the country show, by the time officers and paramedics too, firefighters too, put somebody unconscious through prone restraint and positional asphyxia, by the time they kneel on somebody till they stop fighting, that person may already be in a fatal collapse, already might be dying or dead. And that has happened across the country, and every single time the language is a suspect was in police custody, suffered a medical crisis, was pronounced dead later, right? The number of bodies that that have been in the morgue for absolutely unnecessary reason is absolutely morally, it's a moral failure of our country. And the country is a concept, individual cities, individual municipalities, and what can we do about it, right? Can we march? Marching doesn't do anything, right? Throwing bricks scared people, but it didn't actually foster genuine change. You know, Jacob Fry, the mayor, meant well, but he didn't actually change much, partially because he didn't have the power to, and partially because the system churns on. And when Amir Locke was shot on January 1st, 2 years later, first 3 things that Jacob Fry said were dishonest, if not outright lies. So there's a part of me that says, I don't expect the individual leaders to do the leading because they haven't been forced, right? Every time you call 911 with a question, you generate an emergency response, pretty much. It could be a code 2, hey, some lady thinks there's a squirrel doing something weird in her power box outside. We will show up because fire department is the default. We don't have handcuffs. We don't have an ambulance. It's just us, right? This face is the face of the guy who's supposed to figure stuff out. But you think about this. Now that we all have cell phones, you're driving by and you see something and you call it in. You've got a question. Like that statue of, kind of the homeless Jesus outside of the basilica, that has generated hundreds of 911 calls over time. Because someone driving by on the way to 394 sees, it's cold out, I see a body on the grass, I see a body on the bench, right? Dispatch, the system doesn't allow dispatch to any longer to kind of ask clarifying questions. They have an algorithm they have to follow. And that algorithm does not, I don't know that logic or common sense is anywhere in that algorithm, unfortunately. So they'll send us. One of my points is that we who are emergency responders need to know that we're going to be responding to a wonderful Pandora's box of chaos, nuttiness, struggle, dysfunction, right? But if when it pops on my screen, engine 17, one having trouble breathing, and I show up and it says possible heart attack, okay, let's get ready to do CPR. And I walk in and it's just somebody who's been on a 5-day meth jag who thinks their head is detached from their body. That's okay, we'll talk. If it's somebody who's just been broken up with and they're hyperventilating, that's okay, we'll just talk. If it's someone who's clutching their chest, we're not gonna talk, right? Like, we're making distinctions as we should. But too many of my coworkers and too many of the paramedics are ground, and the police officers as well, are ground into just this default response. And if you're not looking at the individuals in front of you, you are not seeing the human beings. And if you're not seeing the human beings in front of you, the ability to go back to what I started with, which is us versus them. That old salty captain was like, they basically watch out for the contagion, watch out for the dirty, watch out for the crazy, watch out for the homeless, watch out for the derelict. Because that is them and your job. And my job is to come home to my family, right? That is my job. My job as a captain is to keep my crew safe. But that doesn't mean shooting the first person I see if I had a gun, which is what the police unfortunately do. It is not treating everyone like a drunk without checking their blood sugar, without seeing, right? Because we see all the people who do not have basically anything. They don't have mental health. They don't have ongoing regular medical health. They don't have places to live. They don't have support. Of course, their behaviors are outside of what we consider normal. That is my job. I should expect almost everyone to be a little nutty. And so if I come in and someone is not speaking English, someone is slurring, someone is not answering my questions at all, I can either say they're non-compliant, or I go, does everyone speak English? No. Are there many reasons for people who aren't answering clearly? Yes. Let's go from there. But if you don't, if you respond with a closed mind and a default, we will do harm to the people we're supposed to serve. And as much as I argue for this, I look at hope in the context of public health as a step above denial, right? I'm just going to hope that my cholesterol gets better. I'm going to hope that that thing that's rattling in my car goes away, right? Basically, it's denial with a sunny outlook. Real hope, and I say, after everything I've been through since 2000, but for the 20-odd years before, I have a fairly radical, cynical compassion. There isn't an us or them. It isn't an us or them. It's all we, right? And within that, there are a lot of people who I cannot help. There are a lot of people who will not take help, right? But the same way that, and there are dangerous people out there. But unfortunately, too many police officers are looking at the one black person walking down the street rather than the cat who's statistically more likely to be a threat, which is a guy who looks like me, right? Culture, the system, and individual bias allows that to happen. And they're missing the real threat, right? I say that with my coworkers, and I didn't write very much at all about firefighting in my book because I'm not that interested in it on that level. I wanted more to look at all the ways that our healthcare system is a mess and all the ways that our human actions struggle with that. Outside of this church, all up and down Nicollet, all up and down Franklin, you will see a range of people going to work, people going to their apartments, people living on the street, people hanging out, doing all sorts of, not even nefarious because they're very blatant about it. I don't pretend that me smiling at anyone is going to solve their problems, right? I recognize that a great many of them are going to continue persistent doing whatever they're doing. When I get called to help them, I don't judge them for that, right? And I don't think that just because I'm helping them off the ground, the number of people we've revived from heroin and drug overdoses, hooray for us, they get one more chance, but it's not like it scares anybody straight. You just keep going. And that's that sense of you're in the machine and you just give everyone another chance and hope that one day it sticks. There's no connection. And as long as you're comfortable with there's no connection, it makes it a little bit easier not to take it personally. But that's one of the challenges. People talk about how we can build a community. And I don't know other than trying to be patient and present, right? The people hanging out on the street are absolutely human beings. They're absolutely struggling. They're absolutely allowed to make their own decisions. We may not find common ground with them, right? Some of them are loud and abrasive, but not all. A lot of people are in crisis. And since the 70s, when we stopped institutionalizing the mentally ill with the idea that we were going to put them in group homes, but basically the Republicans never found the money to build the group homes, so the streets are full of unstable people and people who don't have access to their meds, who don't take their meds. So that is in every city in this country, that is a reality, that the homeless population has surged in the past 30 years and 40 years because medical cuts and mental illness, right? That is what's going on outside of of this church, right? It's not something that you and I are going to be able to solve. It is capitalism, and it is a for-profit healthcare system. right? But it's out there, and it doesn't mean Minneapolis is bad and St. Paul is bad. Like, every other city is having the same struggles. And I don't have any real solutions other than trying to treat each person I encounter with respect and dignity and a sense of humor, right? If this face manages not to get punched on a daily with the people that we see, I'm doing something okay, right? But it is that compassion and that connection that allows us to try to get through the day and get to the morning. Do you all have any questions? Yes. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I got you. I got you. No, that makes me feel sad. You sit down. I was saying, I'm not being ageist, but I'm younger.
Thank you for your talk. Even though it's kind of a dismal situation, but what I'm interested in knowing, and you've skirted around it a little bit, is that there's now a system for sending out mental health workers for psychiatric situations. Is that going to keep building? And how effective do you see that? Because it sounds a lot better than police showing up with their guns loaded, ready to shoot.
That's a great question. And I think I got thrown off a little bit with the bumpy start, so I forgot that part. Minneapolis has added one outlet beyond the three, beyond police, paramedics, and fire, which is the BCR, the Behavioral Crisis Response Team. They did it a couple years ago. I asked, hey, great, are we going to train with them? I would love to learn some real stuff other than just faking it. Oh no, they're separate. So I will say that, unsurprisingly, within any city, territorial pissing really ruins what could be an otherwise good Jell-O mix, right? So the BCR came, they had 2 people, 1 van, they worked about 6 hours a day the first year. Not everyone has a breakdown on a convenient schedule. They've been successful, but honestly, my personal feeling is that they were not budgeted to succeed, right? The other part is, I genuinely mean, we should be training, and that is the gist of what I've said to all the firefighters, all the paramedics or police with whom I've spoken. There is no reason that we can't do this part, this 80% of our job better with training. We should be working with the BCR, right? They are better at de-escalating, but then the asterisks are someone who's self-harming, someone who's violent, they call us in anyhow. A great many people, and that's with, again, firefighters, like, we just walk in and we're clowns. We're barely trained. We don't have handcuffs. We don't have, we're like, hey, what's up? Oh, you're drunk? Okay, what's going on? Right? Like, we're good by habit and maybe by disposition at de-escalating. Some of us. The BCR does a good job, but to pay for people is a budget item, right? It's finances. There are so many things that we could do. We could dedicate a social worker, nurse, to the top 100, or say 10 of them, to the top 100 911 daily callers. Other cities have done this. And so they just go and check out and say, how are you feeling today? How are your meds? What's going on? How's that, how's your mental health? How's your gout? How's your nosebleed? Whatever your issue happens to be today. They could do that, and that will reduce 911 calls. But to pay 10 of us as a full-time position versus pretending that none of these people are going to call ever again, the budgeteers go with the latter, not the former, right? And that's the problem. BCR, they're not fully supported, and so the city's got it on paper, and they've had to grudgingly add more, right? But it's still not fully wrapped in. And I also really believe that with better training, we could do that too, right? So it's not either or, I think it's a together. That's a great question. Thank you so much for that. Other questions?
I got it.
Get your steps in. And we'll go like this.
Who's next?
No, we're just gonna go, you're next.
Oh, okay.
So is there some municipality, country that does it better and that we could look to for an example?
Universal health care says what?
Say it again.
Universal health care says what? Yeah, many countries do it much better.
I would guess that's true.
And one of the things that happened and has happened several times is on the police side, police chiefs from across America have gone over to England, to Belgium, to Ireland. You don't understand what it's like in Minneapolis, Texas, wherever, son. It's dangerous out here. And the Brits like, well, I don't know, a guy with a knife's a guy with a knife. But they de-escalate. Right? And here's the thing. I'm not saying that there aren't violent people out here. I'm not saying that there aren't very sick and ill people out here. The majority are not. And in that gap is where all the people get hurt and killed who had every right to be able to go home or go to the hospital. That's my point. When we blindly say that that 1 point threat is actually anybody, that is a failure in our job. And so there are many places that are doing it better. Like all the people keep voting to dismantle Obamacare or ACA, while they're benefiting from it, like our whole system and our whole identity, and I'm writing a lot about denial in my follow-up book, denial, aging, and then the kind of the nastiness of masculinity that causes so many of the ills of our country. That would be one of them. So that's the answer to that. Many places do it much better. You're next. Miss Atlanta.
Okay. I probably don't need this. So
It's for the internet.
Okay. I have a couple of questions, and one of them you've touched on a lot, but with all of the experience that you have in the field, first of all, everybody needs to read your book. The people that are calling 911 to have an understanding of what happens, the people who are working in emergency response, because you touch on so many issues. I mean, it's great.
Thank you.
So what other ideas do you have, like if anything were possible to improve the pre-hospital setting, one, and then two, like if you could create your ideal roundtable discussion, who would you put at that table to talk to you and to hear your ideas?
Was that both of them? Both your questions? Was that both your questions? All right, if I were queen for a day, I mean, really, the most important thing would be to revise our 911 system, right? It starts there, right? You all, and there are some people here who are over 35. Anybody here on blood thinners? Coumadin, anybody? No? Okay, you're all, it's a Scandinavian heavy crowd. You all are hardy, and then she's just unkillable. Anybody over 70, if you're retired, no, I got it, yeah. But if you are retired and some whippersnapper comes in and says, okay, sir, your wife says you're talking a little funny today. What day is today? If you're retired, you say, I don't know and I don't care because I don't go to work anymore. A 24-year-old paramedic who has no understanding of what it's like to be old, well, X right there. He's got he's mentally diminished. Capacity's diminished, right? Us starting at the beginning of the system and then training downwards so that we all understand that the majority of our work is not life or death, and yet it's also essential. So that would be a systemic and then the individual, which is really what I talk about all the time. And also, I don't have the money to make the for-profit hospitals stop, the insurance companies stop, and get the city. I think the lead preacher, pastor here is thinking about running for mayor, right? That would be great, but money runs everything. Cash rules everything. It is a real challenge to get new ideas through because the people who run the city have money and they like what they do. My ideal dinner. So James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, there are so many interesting people who are doing good work on trying to find reform. I've met people across the country who do it. There are some very good writers like Atul Gawande and then Sunita Puri are both docs who talk a lot about aging and mortality, both brilliant. They're seeing it in the hospital setting. I am not a doctor. I'm seeing it in the streets, though. There is a connection. They are seeing the people we see over and over again. A roundtable discussion without teeth, without the ability to make the changes, it's just more talking, and that's really the challenge. And so I don't have a good answer for that because these are policy things and they need to be genuine policy. Great, BCR is a great example. Minneapolis brought in the BCR, they talked about it a lot, they had a checkbox, but did they actually support it? I've got a very good friend, my personal lawyer, if you will. She was one of the members of the Civilian Police Review Board. The city refused to fill the last spot, so they never had quorum, so they couldn't meet. The city hamstrung the group that was supposed to be helping with police reform, right? That's the level of word that starts with an F and ends with a Y that drives people nuts because the system will not police itself, will not correct itself. So that's where I'll just go Baldwin and Morrison.
Thank you. Okay, so I haven't read your book. I'm going to get it on the way out. I work at the Center for Victims of Torture, and we work with traumatized people all over the world. And so I wondered if this lecture might go in that direction where we also do resiliency trainings with frontline workers, and it's not just human rights defenders, but school teachers, nurses, doctors, right? And all the fields you are talking about here are also, I think, would value or probably benefit from that kind of resilience training or therapy, as you talked about very clearly. And so there's so many questions there I want to ask you, but instead I want to ask you this. What does the Minneapolis Police Department, Minneapolis firefighters, and EMT, what do they think of you, your theories, and your book?
Look at her flattering me by saying she wants to read the book. Lots and lots of people haven't read the book, don't worry. As I said, I see myself more like Ishmael. I am grateful that by nature and nurture, I've always been oppositional. I've always been unwilling to accept a status quo and a narrative that seems spurious or disingenuous. Because of the women who've raised me and shaped me, my allegiance is to them more than to the men whose comfort exists on the backs of the exploited women, or white people who exist on the comforts of the exploitation, whose comfort is based on the exploitation of people of color. Right, so, and yet I'm very clearly a white man. Like and I'm not going to kill myself. Like my job is to try to fight and push against the system. And then I'm old enough now, long enough in the tooth that just raging against the machine looks great when you're 23, but once you're back, it's a little tired, it's hard. I joke a lot, but I'm absolutely deadly serious. My book has a lot of words. I am a word nerd. I love language. It is an attempt at a literary book. There are no pictures. So I have a cohort of people who don't like to read, who want to see cool, scary fire photos. There are no scary fire photos in this book. There are a lot of big words. And I use the word masculinity in the third page, and that scared off about 90% of the fire boys. Oh, he's talking about that stuff. I don't care, because here's the thing. I've watched some of my mentors at work were women who had to deal with all the chauvinism, all the racism, and all the homophobia. And to get by, because you get more with honey than vinegar, or sugar too. I just give everybody diabetes. They had to be much more polite. Like, I don't have to because I'm a white man. I can go toe to toe because I am very hard-nosed, and I don't mind. I'm not intimidated by the guys who shout, right? So I would just say, why are you saying this? What are you trying to do? And they flipped out because there wasn't a there, right? But my mentors did not have the freedom that I had, because even though everyone knew from the very beginning when they heard that I was the only male member of the Minnesota Women's Firefighter Association, token, ally, hashtag, they thought, of course it was like, oh, he's queer, right? It was like all the ways that dumb men deal with that stuff. There's so many of my coworkers who deal with it with a sense of humor. Like I joke that our station logo is a sparkly unicorn, which I picked after 2020, or in the aftermath of the riots. I said, there's so many bulls and skeletons and devils because all these fire guys trying to be tough. So I went with literally the fruitiest unicorn I could find. Most people think it's funny. Children love us like they love Wu-Tang. Like it is awesome. A select bunch of our firefighters are like, well, I'm not doing that, because God forbid you have a rainbow on your shirt. So there's like they've already failed the test. I had, and unless there's, I can do one more question after this. I had a lot of my coworkers' spouses, parents, and children reach out to me after the book came out. A handful of paramedics, handful of my coworkers who were thoughtful, who all said, thank you so much. You captured what I didn't understand they went through. And my coworkers said, you articulated things that I've known for a long time and never understood that I knew, right? So that the resonance is there. Your son is 23 in an EMT school. I spoke at our fire training ground the other day, just dealing with rookies. And instead of yelling at them, I was trying to give them existential riddles, essentially. And it's hard to say, you're 24 years old, you're starting this career, like, what's the most important meal to cook? What's the best shift? I'm like, all right, I'm not the fun guy. You should do therapy, you should do yoga, you should eat lean, and you should probably breathe, meditate, and run a lot, and don't drink. I just pissed all over your fireman identity, but that's it. If there are no other, one last question, anyone else? I know we're at time. Oh, you want one? Okay. And then thank you all so very, very much.
Actually, I'm not a question. I'm going to pull the plug because we are.
All right, we're done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.
And if anyone, thank you all so much for taking the time. I'm sorry we went over. I'm glad everyone made it in. If anyone wants, I do have books for sale over here, and I'll sign them and do all the rest. Thank you all. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Please come back next Sunday when Nathan Stock, a policy advocate and conflict analyst with the Carter Center, will present a follow-up to his presentation last spring on the drivers of polarization and political violence. This time he will discuss the tactics and strategies we can employ for bridging the divides among us. So, thank you so much.